And welcome to the Factor Uncensored, off the clock. And we're talking about former CNN anchor Don Lemon, who was arrested by the federal government, accused of his role in the coverage of the church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is making headlines all around the country and around the world. Our guests are here to talk about it tonight. And of course, Lemon is not the only journalist arrested. Georgia Foster also arrested and taken into custody for her coverage as well. Our guests are here on the Factor Uncensored. We have with us Dr. Ruth Allen Olison, a journalist and pastor, Siobhan Herndon, also a journalist here in Houston. We have Judge Mike Fields and attorney Frank Spagnoletti. Glad to have you all here on the Factor Uncensored. Well, I kind of knew it was coming, but I didn't know I would actually see it. Don Lemon being arrested by the federal government. So, first of all, Dr. Ruth, as a journalist, what are your thoughts about this arrest, and do you think it's warranted?
I do not think it's warranted. I think it is dangerous. We woke up in a different country today. Part of the Constitution, the First Amendment says we have freedom of the press. And the government is not to challenge that or to take away that freedom. Now, having said that, I don't like what happened. I don't like what Don Lemon did from a standpoint of a pastor. I don't like that, but he has a perfect right
And,
to
and
do
really
it.
quick, Dr. Ruth, before you go on, explain to the viewer out there what he allegedly did that didn't sit well with you.
Well, the whole protest thing coming into the church and disrupting the church, that bothered me as the protesters bothered me. Now, from what I understand, he was embedded with the protesters. So he has a right to do that as a journalist. But I don't believe that they had a right to come in and disturb people who were trying to worship God, because we also have a freedom of assembly and a freedom of religion. So you have a lot of things conflict grading here that do not work. But I'm just saying that as a journalist, he had a right to be embedded in that situation if he wanted to. And yet I disagree with what they did. But we have to, as Americans, we have to protect the freedoms of people to do what they have a right to do, even if we disagree with what they do.
All right, Frank, let's hear from you. Your thoughts about Don Lemon's arrest and Georgia Foster as well as journalists.
Well, I agree with about 90% of what your last speaker said, except I disagree with her because once the journalist has a certain right to certainly cover that event, but the journalist does not have a right, not only under the Constitution, but under the FACE Act and the Ku Klux Klan Act to go into a church and disrupt the ceremonies. Let's turn it around. What if there was a assembly of Catholics and very pro-life Catholic church, and all of a sudden a bunch of pro-choice people came in and started to disrupt that church because they were talking about being anti-abortion? And when the journalist embeds himself within the actual protest, the journalist loses that cloak of journalism. He could have certainly stayed outside the church and covered the event, but this was a hoax. He was with the deal, it appeared to me. And so once he did that and they entered that church, they violated the peaceful right of assembly and peaceful right to practice their religion in their church without disturbance. And that's because if we cross those lines and allow that, what other church? We're going to have KKK guys breaking into black churches on the weekend. We're going to
We've
have,
already had that.
well, yeah.
We've had that for 400 years. We get that.
Well, I know you get that, but there's a law against it now, okay? And there's been a law against it. So I understand that. But you wouldn't want them busting into your church on the weekend. And I'm just saying, I'm okay with him covering the event. I'm not okay with him embedding and then going into the church and disturbing those worshipers on a Sunday morning. And once we cross that line, we basically violate the rights of the people to peacefully assemble and practice their religion, and I'm not for that. But I am in agreement with you on the other things. I mean, uh, yeah, yeah, I believe journalists should have the right to say whatever they want. Could have stood outside the church and reported it fine. He didn't need to go in there and stick the microphone in the preacher's face, regardless of whether you believe in the preacher or not, regardless of whether the preacher, God forbid, is a devil worshiper or something. I mean, we just don't do that. That's what the Constitution protects, and it protects that right of assembly. And if we don't protect our churches, then what else are we going to protect? I mean, and
And
so what I'm saying
and
is,
Frank, we're talking about apples and oranges here, but I want to pick an issue
not
with
so
one of the
much.
things you said about embedding. Once a journalist is embedding, they've gone too far or they lose their credibility. But the United States has invited journalists to be embedded in the military as we go into
Different,
other countries. So,
different,
what do you think the
different.
difference is there?
The difference is here that he was embedded and went into a church, which is protected under our laws in this country. When they're embedded in a foreign country and they're following the military around, there's no particular protection for the enemy and for the embedded journalists to be able to report whatever. But in this case, he embedded with the protesters, and then they all went in and started to disrupt that Sunday morning service, and that is where they crossed the line. And he
All right.
shouldn't have done it, and he knew that it was certainly just a stunt. And so, if you don't draw the line and tell them no, then what are we going to do? Have this every Sunday? The anti-abortionists are going to be protesting the pro-life people on the Sunday or whatever. I just don't believe it should happen. It's a time of peace. Churches are a place where people, no matter what their religion is, try to gather themselves and have peace from the world. They should not be violated like that. And he knew it.
Okay. And Frank, just to be clear, when I referred to embedding, you said they lose their credibility once they're embedded. That's my issue. Not going into a church, not going into another country, but journalists are embedded into entities,
No,
institutions, military all the
I'm
time.
okay with that. I'm okay with
Okay,
that, but
let's bring in
not.
Judge Mike Fields. Your thoughts about this, Judge?
They're complicated. I disagree that this embedding was enmeshment, which is what I hear Mr. Spagnoletti talking about. Don Lemon wasn't enmeshed with this group, or so he says, and I'll take him at his word. I do believe that both he and the protesters should be arrested, but not for violating the FACE Act, but for criminal trespass. Because irrespective of whether you're embedded or not, you're trespassing in that church facility. With respect to the protesters, they may very well committed a FACE Act violation. And just for the public, the FACE Act was set up. It's freedom of access to clinic entrances. It was set up as a protection for women who had made the choice to terminate a pregnancy to be able to walk into a clinic without being harassed. I find it hypocritical that an organization like ICE, which is using Gestapo tactics and the very same kinds of tactics that are used to prevent women from having access to health care, are now attempting to use that law to protect themselves. That seems to me a bit hypocritical. With respect to the issues of Black churches and the destruction or the entering of Black churches, I think we still see Black churches burned. We still see young women destroyed for their belief in Christ in our churches. And I think if they were to walk into a larger Black church, they might have gotten the right hand of fellowship and then maybe a left. But we didn't see that. What we did see was a former highly respected journalist arrested for, I think, the wrong crime. But walking into that church, irrespective of whether you're embedded or not, you have the right to free speech, but you don't have the right to trespass.
Well,
Just
you make a very interesting point, and you're right. It's very complicated because
yeah.
the doors of this church are unlocked right now, because it's unlocked, that means anyone can come in here. Now, I may not like what they do, but they're coming in here doesn't make it trespassing.
And
No,
that's
Correct.
where I want to come in on this conversation because Dr. Ruth, you are a pastor. You are a leader of this of your congregation. Don Lemon walked in and identified himself as a journalist, like, hey, I'm here to cover the protest. And you have one of the leaders of the church standing right there with Don and taking part in the interview. If he had an issue with it, why not say, not this time, some other time, I would like you to leave? That never came out of the leader's mouth. Don went around freely interviewing people with the leaders of the church, knowing he was there in a journalistic capacity. So how can that be embedded into protesters when he walked in, identified himself more than one time, and communicating and interviewing the leaders of the church? Make it make sense. That's what I have an issue with understanding. There's no trespassing here. He walked in
so
with protest.
So I
I
gotta no, so
go
now I
ahead.
gotta push back because he didn't walk into worship. They walked in to disturb the worship, and they
Right.
disturbed the worship. And that is a problem. And he entered in the interview, I heard the interview. The interview, by the way, was mostly about him. It wasn't about the situation. I mean, it was inappropriate. What they did was inappropriate, and what he did was inappropriate. But I'm
As a
not
leader
sure.
of the church, respectfully, Dr. Ruth, why didn't the leader say, please leave or just remove Don from the church?
I
Why
can't.
did he? Okay,
Well,
that's where I want to know.
in Texas law, and I don't know that this is the law in that state, but in Texas law, the door is a sufficient warning that you can't enter for inappropriate purposes. Um, and
So,
I
really
think
quick,
that,
Judge, is it
yeah,
understood that you're there to worship and worship only? And if you're there for anything else under the law, then you're violating that law.
I believe so. I think that that's a reasonable expectation for parishioners on Sunday. Um, you know, just because I'm an HVAC repair guy doesn't mean that I can walk into your church uninvited and start tinkering with your HVAC because, well, the doors were open and no one told me to leave. That I get it, but that's a pretext argument, and it begins to sound ridiculous when carried out to a lunatic extreme, which is what we saw here. That having been said, protesting the actions of immigration and custom enforcement in Minnesota, that's legitimate. It's real. It needs to happen.
It
And
does.
everyone who is a not just a person of conscience, but a person who cares about the Constitution should be outraged by what they're doing. Attacking this man's church is a bridge too far.
All
Well,
right. Go ahead, Frank.
I was going to say, I agree with many of the comments, some of the comments that were just made by your guest, but I would say this. I think the whole thing has gotten all too far, which is how we wind up with this. Remember, first of all, let's say what this is. What you, two of you here have said that apparently have churches. It is a house of worship, just like my house is my house. You don't have a right to bust in my door and because you want to protest me. And that's why I think the comment about trespass is a fair comment. And so you don't bust into the house of worship and then and the other comments with regard to what happened. I mean, people were scared to death. We've had so many people killed in churches,
Right.
synagogues, all kinds of different ways. That preacher, I'm sure, was trying to diffuse the situation. He's got a microphone stuck in his face and he's trying to like talk. The other people were hiding, wondering what the heck was going on. And who the hell knows if somebody had a gun? These people weren't peacefully protesting. If you really watch the video, they were screaming and all the rest. And when I'm asked to say this, with regard to Minnesota, the temperature just needs to come down. I agree with that. I should not be picking up people, but the government in those states should be cooperating and turning over people that they have who are criminals from their own countries that have been rapists, murderers, or anything else where they had a detainer on them. And then ICE wouldn't be having to go through the streets and hunt for these kind of people. And I think that's where we need to get to because these things happen mostly. They don't happen in so much in the white communities like River Oaks or West U, and all these places. They happen in other parts of the cities, and therefore you have these clashes. You have ICE hunting for some child molester, and then running into a bunch of other people and disturbing the neighborhood. Let's let the governments work together for the betterment of all the communities and take the criminals, whether they're illegal immigrants or migrants, whatever you want to call them, or whether they're just criminals in general. Let that part of it be peacefully done between the governments and not like we have going on, which appears to create a lot of chaos. And we can
If I
Right.
could,
We got
Nobody
time for one
trusts.
response, guys. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, this started 8 years ago when someone looked at the press, got elected, and said fake news. The undermining of the press has been going on in this country by this president for 8 years. And everybody better watch out, because when the press is no longer watching and the press is afraid and the press is shut down, we no longer have a very important freedom that makes us America.
The press has the obligation to tell the truth as well, and they don't.
well, they do, and I
Not always.
disagree. I disagree with that, but I will say this: people constantly say that President Obama deported more than anybody. He did. He deported quite a few people. Didn't kill any Americans doing it. Didn't have the federal troops on the streets of our cities while it happened, and treated people who were here illegally with dignity and respect, and his own citizens.
I voted for Obama twice. I'm good with Obama, but I'm just saying the border was way more open after that. We had chaos. We need
This is not about the border. You know, this is not about the border.
It is about the border.
It is not about the border.
Well,
it's about all of this stuff with ICE and all this. This is racism. We have something going on that's totally, it's about people of color.
It is
not. And you're not in any position to talk about.
Yes, I am.
We know.
Wait,
let's
not forget.
What it looks like.
I know too. You don't know anything about me, madam.
What it looks like.
Pastor,
and
you don't know anything about
we have
me. You don't know that my relatives were discriminated against, even though we were Italian, because we had olive skin. So don't tell me I don't know about racism. They were treated like dog in New York.
This is Frank, Dr. Olson. This is where they want us, isn't it? Fighting amongst one another, as opposed to fighting.
Don't tell me I don't know about discrimination. We do.
Not
the
same
as you,
guys,
okay?
Guys,
don't
please.
put down my.
All righty, guys.
Please.
All righty.
And Isiah, last comment. Let's not forget Miss Georgia in this situation. I know Don Lemon is making the headlines, but Georgia was just there filming on her phone. None of the video was published. None of the things that she filmed, she went to social media about. And here she is, a mother being arrested because of she just being there covering the event. Like, it's got to stop.
All right. We want to thank you guys for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored. Frank, Dr. Ruth, Siobhan, and Judge Fields. We appreciate your time here on The Factor Off the Clock.